Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Human SOS Show. We're at episode 79. We're rocking along. Boy, before we turn around, we'll be at 2 years here, Anton. Uh, been quite a ride, hasn't it? Um, and welcome, everybody. Be sure to uh, tell us where you're joining from and where in the world you're joining from. And also, we always want to invite you to join us with your comments, your questions, your thoughts as we go along. So, Anton, you want to get it get us kicked off?
Absolutely. We have to recount because me and you are off by one, and we went off. I think like 2 weeks ago. You
Oh,
got
did we?
79. I got 78. I'm like, I don't know who's right.
Uh
I'm not that confident in my counting ability, so I'm not gonna
oh.
I'm not
Well,
gonna
hey,
claim to be right.
good to be human, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's the point of the show, right? But hey, folks, thanks for joining. For those of you that may be new to the show, Human SOS. It's kind of a human resources geared show where we try to help companies manage stress and really bring the human being to the forefront organization. But we don't do it just from a health standpoint. We believe that people are, this complete being. It's not just about work. It's not just about life. It's not just about health. It's about all those components and custom tailoring development to individuals based on their individual needs versus just a one size fits all formula or approach that often is being thrown out in those circles. But today we're going to talk about motivating your team through aligned values and discuss what kind of strategies we can take and what we can do to find better motivations on teams. Maybe especially now when we're in more remote cultures. We've kind of gone through the COVID phase, but remote culture is not going away. I have a new job and I work fully remote in a job that used to be fully in the building. This really nice building out there in the municipal city, area sitting completely empty almost because people realize that there is benefits to remote work. And I think that motivation, when you don't have somebody in front of you all the time, becomes a lot harder because you don't have this oversight of accountability, perhaps. And people are needing to be motivated more from within themselves and be more self motivated than they probably ever were before.
Yep, definitely. It's still an issue we haven't fully addressed, and we haven't considered the impact of it either. So definitely got some adjustment to do and some learning to in the process.
Yeah, so first we'll dive into, as always, we like to cover just a little article on what what's going on in HR. And this one's interesting. We talk a lot about mental health. Mental health is something that's really important to both Kevin and I because obviously stress is all part of that. And mental health has become a big topic of conversations, but people are not still not doing the right thing by it. And this is a situation where Department of Labor state regulators step up enforcement around mental health parity. And basically, there's a law passed a while ago that said there shouldn't be harder for people to get mental health help as in comparison to regular, physical health help. And they're discovering that companies are creating a lot of roadblocks, or they may have different, ways of getting that help, and that's technically illegal. So uh, there was a lawsuit in New York, and this company was sued for a lot of money, and the state won, and the plaintiffs won, and it's just one of many that can keep happening if people don't start to realize we are complete beings. We
Mm,
don't just have this separation down the middle. One type of health connects into the other type of health, and we can't say, well, we'll really take care of you here, but mental health, it's not real, right? It's not. It's just something that's nice to have on paper. We're not actually going to pay for it. Well, you're wrong, and this is what's happening. Any thoughts on this one, Kev?
yeah, it as I reflect on it, it's interesting to me that we're dealing with this. And I think part of it, I'm always looking at history and roots and culture. And I think part of the problem is that there was a period of time where our culture shifted um, away from the mental, emotional, and spiritual, if you will. And as a result, we have a one dimensional look at what is well being, and that is physical, and it drives priority. And it's unfortunate that we have gone there. And because even with the shifts in culture, hopefully growth in culture, that we realize that mental and emotional challenges and health issues don't make people bad. They don't make them less than, because we all struggle with it. But yet, we still don't get away from the taboo of it. Oh, well, you had a emotional issue. Well, you're somehow tainted now. And I think it's unfortunate that we are at still at a place that we are in that, and this information kind of reflects that. I would say anyway.
Absolutely, man. And to me, I think that finally people are gonna have to be waking up because mental health is not gonna get better, guys. I'm sorry, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer. It's just we're very reactive with it. And anytime you're reactive with anything, you're not going to really fix the problem. You're helping to alleviate symptoms, but
Uh-huh.
we're not really addressing root causes of much of this. Stress is the primary one. I'm a nerd for stress. Kevin, likes to laugh about it when I start to talk about it because I have so much passion. I lost my dad to a really at a really early age when I was 8, he was only 45, and the man worked himself into the ground. This was well before mental health concepts were even around, and it's just what you did. And I spent a better part of my life studying stress and understanding it. And it's gonna get worse, folks. Unfortunately, I hate to say it, it's gonna get a lot worse, and it's gonna get a lot more expensive for companies too. And when that finally happens, when the fiscal side is being really impacted, the bottom line is being impacted, unfortunately, then employers will start doing more about it, but they're going to be behind the curve because we're talking about employee motivation. We talk about aligned values today. If you're just joining, and if your company doesn't see that you care and support team members in the areas that they want to be cared and supported for, you're not going to have long-lived employees. You may have a lot of great things, but if they feel like you don't care about them as human beings, chances are they're going to be looking for somebody that can give them that in the long run. They may get the experience from you, they may get a few promotions from you, but they're always looking out the door going, what else is out there? Because I don't feel like I belong here. I don't fit in because I care about these values, but you don't.
Yeah. Welcome, Suzette and Chris and Sharon. Glad to have you all this morning. Look forward to hearing your comments. And in fact, we'll start off one with Chris, and that is, oh, got to get my cursor on the other screen. Isn't it great that people are opening more to expand well-being beyond just our physical health? It is, and what is real interesting is, and again, this is part of this cultural shift that we had a number of decades back, that we assumed that physical health was completely removed from mental and emotional health. And what we are seeing and learning is that, in fact, a lot of what is at the heart of physical health is mental, emotional, and spiritually based. And we're hopefully going to make some headway towards even looking at the physical health from a broader, better perspective. So
You can pop that
definitely
off,
more.
Kev, but it's such a great point. I'm glad that the audience is chiming in on this. Ultimately, I say this all the time. This is you guys can feel free to quote me, but thoughts create chemicals, chemicals create thoughts. And it's not one way or another. That's how it goes. So your thoughts can actually create a chemical response, a physical response in your body will then in turn create a lot of negative, consequences or positive ones, depends on how it goes. And vice versa, those chemicals, when they start to go off, impact our brain, which can then in turn create different kind of thoughts and not good kind of thoughts. And in order to solve these issues, we have to come from both ends of the spectrum. We
Yeah.
have to find that middle ground, find that middle, how to help people and adjust all that. But, so getting into motivation, right? So we mentioned as people are going remote and going to continue to stay remote, you can pop that off for now, Kev. We don't really need
Okay.
that. We are need to, as employers, leaders, managers, whatever you want to call yourself, need to find ways to motivate people in a different way, right? Financial motivation is always going to be important. I'm not going to say that paying your people well is not going to matter. It always matters. But
Mm-hmm.
there's been plenty of research done that every single country, every single place where people work has a specific number that once that number is reached in pay, that is no longer a good motivator for people because they're making enough to cover their basic necessities. They're making enough to, make the money that they need to do what they want to do. And after that, now you're cutting into my free time. Now you're, not paying attention to the things that I talk about. Now you're going against my values, which, we're talking about today. So we have to expand beyond these, what I call stick and carrot motivations, right? Stick and carrot motivation is going to be, if you do good, I give you a carrot. If you do bad, I'm going to give you the stick, right? So if you're fired or your job's on the line, performance improvement, which we'll talk about next week. So we have to get creative. So I want to ask you, folks, hopefully in the audience, you have experience with this. What are some values that are really important to, team members? What are some of those things that they genuinely care about that can be a motivator for them and the company can, use or employ in order to get people more motivated?
Well, and Anton, your comment about there's a point of money that people, but it loses its value in terms of motivation. And the ultimate picture of that is when we know of a lot of people that get uh, late in their life and they've made more money than you and I could probably ever think about, and they find themselves in a place where they're very dissatisfied and they know something's missing. And so even for those people that get to those kinds of levels, the money loses its allure. So everybody has a limit there. And so to look at that as the primary motivator and primary fulfillment is a grave error for any of us. And so we certainly need to keep that in mind. All
And
right.
it's interesting. I've asked these kind of questions in polls before, and our show is, global. We get folks from all over the world. That's why our time is so weird sometimes. So we get as many people on. But many people from countries that are not necessarily Western countries, that are less established or their economies are not doing as well, they still pick money as a high level of motivation because they're
Mm-hmm.
not making enough. So, we have to be conscientious to say that it's not important. It's just that should be table stakes, right? Pay your people
Right.
what they're worth. That
That's right.
should be something that is just automatic. Because if you don't, they should be going somewhere else, and hopefully countries are catching up, which I know they are, and eventually that'll happen. I think we got some comments.
Yeah. In other words, that should not even be a motivator. It should be a given.
Yep.
Motivators are beyond the given. Let's see. Got a comment from Chris. Interesting perspective. He said it well, Anton. In order to feel, we have to think, then feel. But the danger is that we get addicted to those chemicals and that make us feel a certain way. Definitely, extremes are not the way we go, right?
No, for sure. And those chemicals, that our body is a chemical factory, right? It's always producing chemicals, and some of those chemicals feel good. Some of them can come from the food that we eat. Some of those chemicals can come from interactions that we have with people. Some of those can come from creating good in the world and making purpose. But the access to how we get to those chemicals sometimes something we need to consider, because you mentioned the word addictive. They are very addictive. Feeling good is an addictive feeling, whether that comes from sugar, whether that comes from exercise, whether that comes from cocaine, for all matter, right? It's all the same thing in our brain responds. Those are extreme examples, but if we have access to it all the time and we're constantly chasing it, like sugar, for example, we burn out that good feeling. It takes more and more
Mhm.
of that response to get that same level of a good feeling, and that's dangerous. So instead, I'm going to challenge folks. If you want that good feeling, go create things with purpose. Go create things with your values, because that's not something that's just quick and right away. It takes work. It takes time to get there, and then you only have access to that feeling once in a while versus daily, hourly, minute by minute that we can from some of those other less positive things.
Right. Welcome, Linda. Glad to have you with us. She has a comment. Says perhaps that if more could come to Jesus Christ and accept him as Lord and Savior, then true peace and that surpasses understanding would come to them. I am, as well as millions of others, are proof. There are demons, and these demons can possess people's minds, and the Bible is clear about this. Christians, however, cannot be bodily possessed, but the fallen have great influence. If people do not know how to fight them, the first and the foremost, second reason for so much mental health issues is. And I appreciate you sharing about your faith, Linda. And indeed, one of the things we strongly believe is that faith is a factor in our well being, and that it is something that we should always make a part and consider as us as a whole being. One of the things we talk about all the time is you can't be healthy just one part of you. It's just not possible. It won't last, and it has to be considered, no doubt about it. Welcome, Hawk. Glad to have you. Hadn't seen you in a while. Good to have you back. Um, let's see here. Chris has
And
another.
Kev, before we
Yeah.
jump in, I mean, I just want to touch on that great comment. And Kev and I share, in that faith. So thank you for saying that. But at the same time, we know that there's audience that may not, but there is a common denominator, even if you don't believe in that faith. And Christianity teaches surrender, right? Surrender to His will, and
Mhm.
that's not just about Christianity. It's about letting go control in your life and not trying to
Mhm.
control every variable, and just having faith that things are going to be okay. That's huge for motivation. That's huge for mental health. And companies need to provide the space for employees and team members to have those kind of values, embody those kind of values. We're afraid to talk religion. We're afraid to discuss some of those things in the workplace because maybe it doesn't agree with everybody. But there's ways to have those conversations where people get to express who they are and what they believe, because it's a huge motivator for them, right? And so it's such a great comment. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and that's where the art of leadership comes in. That art is the part of what's missing in a lot of our leadership, management, whatever, is the ability to uh, set up those cultures that allow for those values across multiple people. Um, and let's see, Chris has a comment. It says, I think we start to appreciate one another for our value. It becomes more valuable than money. Indeed. Chris, that's so on target. And as we develop a common set of values for a team, it is makes a remarkable difference. And as I was thinking about this, the other alternative is to look at other motivators. Well, as a leader, if I'm having to bring external motivators all the time, boy, that's exhausting. It's also challenging because we can't um, always come up with that great motivational thing. Some of the attempts of externals, and Anton and I joke about this a bit because it's unfortunately there's truth to it. That ping pong tables, pool tables, and yoga classes. Those are seen as motivators for people, and they offer some external motivation. But if you don't have the shared values as part of your culture, you can do all the rah rah you want. And there's going to be a point, if nothing else, that the leader just gets exhausted from trying to keep up with the rah rah. It just gets to a point of ridiculous.
Well, we know what I'm seeing, Kev. I'm seeing companies trying to be chameleons this year, or really recently, trying to adjust to the popular opinion, trying to avoid stepping into tough conversations. But what they're doing is they're not setting clear values. And I don't know about you folks, but just think about personal interactions with friends and people that you have. Are the kind of people that constantly shift their values or don't make their values known the kind of people you value and respect? Or is it the kind of people that you go, here's my values. I'm not willing to budge on them because those are it. Whether you like them or not, I'm going to keep standing up for them. You may disagree with them sometimes, but you still tend to find a way to respect them. You go,
Mm,
thank you for being this way. I know what to expect from you. I'm not going to be surprised by something that you do tomorrow and be blindsided. But I'm seeing companies talk a lot about culture and values. I'm seeing the green screens going up and everybody's faking it till they make it. But when it comes down to decision making, like I'm telling you, the article we started with, people are making it difficult for people to pursue mental health. Everybody's talking about mental health, but when it comes time to pay for it and take care of their employees, Well, now we got roadblocks. Now we got, a bunch of hoops people got to jump through to get there. So, I think companies really need to start getting better at establishing their values, not being afraid that they go against the norm if that's the case, and standing firm in them.
And Hawk made a couple of comments talking about addictive behavior has a common denominator, and it does, whether it's internal addictions or external. And I appreciate Hawk's also echoing that, talking about the spiritual and praise is the ultimate high. Again, part of those values that we can share and even find common ground on. And we just, it's again, I think the problem, and you and I talk about this a lot, is that businesses continue to do what medicine does, and that's put band-aids and treat symptoms rather than get to the root cause of whatever's going on in the physical world, finding out why someone is dealing with this disease in a body versus, getting to the source. And we do that in terms of culture. We try to put band-aids or cover the symptoms or mask the symptoms. And we've got to start looking at the root causes. And that's part of what we want to do for organizations, is come in and really dig around and help find the roots, rather than, as to use the analogy we sometimes use about a tree, rather than painting the leaves green. We want to figure out why the root cause of it. Is there not enough water, not enough nutrients? What is going on?
I like that one. I don't know if I've heard you say that before.
That's
Painting
a
the
new one.
leaves
I
green.
think I just had one of those once in a lifetime inspirations there, Anton.
No, but I like that because, right, like, and it's exactly what we're talking about, where companies are going around and painting the leaves green. Their leaves aren't green. They're just making it seem like they are because they just added some paint and make it spruced up. And that's the mental health component. I think that's what we're doing with mental health. We're painting the leaves green. We're not actually addressing problems. We're not addressing root causes and things like that. So I really like that one, Kev.
Sharon was supporting Chris's point. I agree that with this point as well, Chris, to start to appreciate more and show it. Yes, appreciation is a key component in dealing with the roots that are out there. And I'll speak to the workforce concept that I remind businesses all the time, that we are getting people in the workforce that are coming to our door as businesses with already wearing a label, and it's the big L. And what a lot of companies don't understand is that until they address that, then they're going to have a difficult time with anything else. And appreciation is one of the best ways to help knock the L off people's forehead for them, is to appreciate them. And it doesn't usually cost money, which is truly remarkable. We're talking about people fighting over nickels and dimes to help their resources, their people, and yet the opportunity to make a difference that won't cost anything dollar-wise, and we just don't understand how to do it.
No, it's interesting listening to people's comments and just start a conversation. When we talk about values, we're usually talking about beliefs into other things, right? But part of a value is self-value. And I think it's one of the biggest ones that, you're talking to make me think about, and that's not often discussed. And what it makes me run a parallel with is we talk about, in order to love somebody else, you have to love yourself, right? You have to have that self-love, self-appreciation. Well, the same thing. In order to embody other values of the company and other values around you, you have to value yourself. You have to see that worth. And that's such a great point, Kev. If employers, leaders are not breaking down that L through gratitude, through appreciation, through development, through so many different things, and even opportunity to fail sometimes, right? Giving people opportunity and letting them fail, and then saying, hey, you're okay. You're not a failure. You just made a mistake. Now go fix it, learn from it, and let's go on with it. So that's a big one for me that I just realized is we got to help people to value themselves.
And we have a comment from Chris. He appreciates sharing support. And if we don't appreciate one another more and help one another see and understand our value, how can we each employ or share our value in the workplace again and again? Right on, Chris. It is a piece that we, again, it's got to be part of the values in our culture, and it has to be shared. What we're looking for is something that, as a team, that we can anchor into as a team, because part of what's going to happen as a team is we're going to have disagreements, we're going to have challenges, and if we're anchored in a set of values, then we don't become demotivated and discouraged, because we can always come back to our values and find that common ground again. And as we were talking about with Dave Gerber, finding common ground is one of the best ways to overcome conflict. And when we have that built in as part of our culture, it helps us to maybe prevent some of the conflict that is not necessary. And Sharon echoes it. Sharon, I'm sorry, you get to be LinkedIn user today, but this is Sharon, and she supports Chris's comment and about the importance to appreciate one another, and key here is show it, and knowing that each other have each other's back goes a long way. That becomes a value. In fact, Anton and I have military in our background, and one of the things that you, regardless of whether you get along with your fellow soldier, at the end of the day, they've got your back. And that value is so important. That's why you have soldiers that are willing to step out and take that risk, because they know that the other soldiers have their back. And that value in a culture of a company can be so remarkably empowering, and it becomes in many cases unstoppable.
It's interesting you bring up the military, because we mentioned that parallel with the business world. A lot of conflict gets solved very, very fast in the military, because it gets brought back to the values, and you're experiencing conflict, and whoever your senior is going to bring it back, maybe chew you out a little bit, because that's how they do it in the military. But they're going to say, why are you here? Why are you doing this petty stuff right now? Why are you here? And they remind us of why we're here. We're here to defend our nation. We're here to, be there for each other, as you said. And then it just makes you slow down and go, you're right. Everything else is petty. Everything else that we're fighting over is really not significant, because we do both care about this thing that we're here for. And companies could stand to use that a lot more. But if you're just joining, folks, we're talking about motivating teams or people through aligned values and just the right way of doing it. And ultimately, it's not about just trying to pay people more. It's not about threatening their jobs. It's about, how do I fit into this big wheel? How am I just as a single cog in that wheel play a bigger role? And how does that align to what I believe, to what I value, and things like that? That's been the topic of conversation. But in motivation in general, right? Like when I talk about motivation, there was a great book that I read a long time ago by Daniel Pink called Drive. And it got me away from this militant way of leading, where do as I say because I said so, it's kind of more of stick and carrot motivation. And it made me realize there's many systems and many models out there, but he explains there's three primary intrinsic motivators, stuff that comes from within us. And that's going to be our autonomy, our purpose, and our mastery, right? And purpose is where those values come in. It's feeling that we're accomplishing our sense of purpose, a feeling like we're in line with our purpose. And every single day we're doing that. That is a crazy high motivator. I mean, when people will do a lot for that good feeling that we talked about. But when that good feeling comes from a sense of accomplishment of our purpose, it's one of the best healthy highs we can have in our life.
And it's consistent, because it's a part of who we are. It's not a manufactured high, if you will. It is a part of us, and that's so key. Hawk has some interesting thoughts. I've had some discussions. Being a monk that loves Hillsong and also having a Tibetan Lama, that is difficult to reconcile for some. And for those of you that don't know Hillsong, that's a Christian band that sings Christian music. So yeah, in some regards, people would see that as being contradictory, and I appreciate what you say. And having a Buddhist monk as a mentor does not stop me from following Jesus. Yeah, I think some of our traditions get in the way of what is reality, and we all have some room to grow in that area.
But isn't that the workplace today, though? I mean, what you just described within yourself, Hawk, that's the workplace that we live in. And that's what I'm saying. Like, we can coexist. We don't have to hide these things. We don't have to say, oh, let's never talk about them. Let's find common ground. Like, maybe we don't focus on where we disagree, but let's find commonalities between both of those beliefs that are similar and focus on that versus focuses on the differences.
Yeah. Welcome, Karen. Glad to have you. Sorry, I saw your name pop up a minute ago. Always good to hear from you from Florida. Karen's one of our regulars. And then we've got we've got 2 LinkedIn users today. Suzette, I apologize why it shows up this way on streaming is beyond me, but she comments, branding has been used as a weapon to derail humanity of businesses for the sake of material gains. Yeah, it is a driver in business culture, and please understand, we agree. And but at the same time, a company, in order to pay and take care of people, has to make money. So we have to keep that as part of the balance. What the challenge is that a lot of companies don't recognize the connection between the two, and keep them both as an important part.
It's an interesting point too, because if anybody knows why companies were created in the first place, companies are not something that's that, old. They've only been around, I want to say late 1800s, early 1900s. And they were created to be able to create infrastructure in order to create be able to do these big projects and make things happen. Because in the past, you could only put together a group of people and it could only be for a set amount of time. Once that thing was accomplished, you had to disband and you had to go about your business in a small business unit environment. But they were created to be able to accomplish a much greater good.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the part that we can't forget. We have to remember that was the initiation. Yes, money is important, like Kevin said, but we can't forget of why companies came around in the first place.
Yeah, usually it's around an ideal, something to solve a problem, something. And interesting comment, and from Hawk, that I can understand, because I think in the U.S., we've gone through phases and are still in a phase to some extent where faith is considered a handicap, or at least it's certainly something that will cause a lot of discussion, shall we say, usually disagreement, and so on. And let's see here. Again, I appreciate everybody. The LinkedIn user thing's throwing me off here. I want to be sure and attribute to the right person. This is Suzette. And she says, values are actioned and demonstrated by business leaders, or at least they should be. Part of the problem is that we've got people in leadership roles that don't get this, and they don't behave in accordance with it. They will throw a few bones to people, if you will, try to check a box to say, okay, well, we did this, but in reality, they aren't bought into a point that they're willing to even invest to the degree that it might even be a little painful in the investment initially. And so, yeah, it is.
You know, a company that does this really well, I just want to bring them up because I absolutely love this company. I'm mad at them on Sunday when I can't have them, but Chick-fil-A. I swear, always when I want Chick-fil-A.
Say what you really feel there, Anton.
It's always a Sunday, but then I remind myself and I go, you know what? Good for them. Good for them for doing what they believe. But does it look like Chick-fil-A is hurting for money? Does it ever? I don't know how it is, and if you guys have Chick-fil-A where you're at on your side of the world or on your side of the country, but Chick-fil-A does not open on Sundays. They're a faith-based organization, and they believe that their employees shouldn't be working on that day. that at 1/7 of their work week, they're potentially giving up and saying, we're not willing to make money on this day. And that could be a really busy day because everybody's, out and about doing stuff. They're not necessarily at work. And that's their value that they've put forth. Their
Yeah.
retention is through the roof. Their leadership development program is amazing. These people end up being owners and they go on to make their own, own their own restaurants and stuff like that. But their lines are always long. They're never hurting for people. You look at these McDonald's and Burger Kings and whatever else you got that don't have these kind of values, and they don't have those kind of lines. So they're actually making better money by following through on their values, by showing their people this is what we stand up for, and it's not about the money.
Welcome, Ms. Suchi. Glad to have you with us today. Always enjoy your presence. And again, and this one, Sharon, and Sharon comments that having each other's back is an important value. It really is, because when you have confidence that your team members have your back, your demeanor changes, your whole outlook changes, because then you feel secure in, first of all, being who you are, and second of all, risking taking a chance of failing. And a lot of initiative happens and a lot of creativity occurs because people are willing to risk failing. And in that environment, it goes a long way. It becomes a great motivator in and of itself.
I think military defines that one very well. And I think I'm going to change the word. They say no man left behind, but I'm going to say no human left behind.
Right.
And I think that kind of definition would be great for all companies to embody, right? It's in every sense of the word: support each other, leave nobody behind, carry them when you have to, put them on your back, carry them through the tough times, and then there's going to come a time where they're going to carry you.
Yeah, and to the point that value is so ingrained, we will risk our own life to save the life of another, even save the honor by not leaving a dead comrade behind. That's how deep and ingrained it is in the culture of the military. And as we can adapt or adopt, I always get those a little confused, but that culture, that mindset, it is, I don't know.
Now you got to go messed up.
But that is so powerful, and it reflects, to get back to what we mentioned earlier, the concept of loving ourselves to be able to love each other. That's kind of a encapsulation of the concept, is that we love each other enough and we love ourselves enough that we are committed to each other. And I know people sometimes get, especially my generation, start talking about love in the workplace. They just start eyes glaze over, or they start shaking their head or whatever. But it is a key motivator. And what's interesting is, with many faiths, love is a centerpiece as well. So it helps to build that common ground. Welcome, Dr. Jesmond. Glad to have you, and appreciate you taking the time. I know sometimes it's a bit of a challenge with your work, and appreciate your commitment. And let's see here.
While you're pulling up for other ones, I just want to recap. If folks are just joining, we're talking about, motivating teams through values. Some key ones that we mentioned, we just talked about no human left behind, being there, supporting each other, allowing people to have their faith and finding common ground amongst people's faith. We talked about having a value of building people up from within, right? Creating that internal value within people and supporting each other through that. And notice, none of these are really the buzzword ones. This is not the typical stuff that I see in organizations, but this is the real stuff that we need to be having more of.
Yeah. And it's interesting, as we talk about what we're sharing, is a number of the folks here with us today are regulars. And I enjoy, because some of these folks are also regulars on my podcast on Mondays, watching that they are connecting to each other to a point that they recognize and greet and so on. And that's the kind of culture that companies need to promote and understand how. And it isn't with the external motivators, because in this case there is no external motivator. These great folks that are participating with us are here because they want to be. It helps. They gain some value in what's going on, and they gain value from each other. And that is a huge motivator. In fact, this is a good point to share. Normally, one of our regulars is Rosemary McKenzie from Australia. And Rosemary texted me and apologized she couldn't be here, but Australia has shifted their daylight savings time. So for her to attend this program, rather than starting at 10 o'clock, would now start at 11 o'clock. And so she just said she has an early day tomorrow, but she apologized. And that is the culture that occurs when we are centered around a common set of values. And so we're seeing a microcosm of what we're talking about just in the people in this group. Nobody gets paid for this, and Anton and I aren't sending out gifts to these folks aside from love and concern and sharing our experience. And it makes a difference, and motivating people to get up at or stay up or whatever. You can't buy that. There's not enough money to get that.
You're such a leader, Kevin. I mean, I love it.
Oh.
It's just perfect example. If anybody wanted to see how values need to be played out and shared and appreciated, here you go. That was a live, unscripted example of it, right? We value human connection. I mean, human SOS, at the center of it is the word human, and connection is at the foundation of everything we do. We've been talking about leadership. Relationship is the foundation of that pyramid, right? That starts with that. And this is what we are looking for in our show. And what did Kevin just do? He went and praised that. He made people feel good about taking the actions, because sometimes people may have a little bit of reservation going like, well, it's not my show. I don't want to greet other people. It should be focused on that. No, let people feel appreciated. Let them know you see them. Let them know you hear them. Say thank you for their comments. It's not just about us. And Kevin just did a great job of playing that out, showing how our value aligns to yours, and then providing gratitude for it. That was well done.
Well, I guess it's ingrained. It
I
was
know.
not an intention.
But I just wanted to point it out. I was like, there it is. There's your perfect example.
Well, and I have to chuckle again, your comment about Chick-fil-A, and obviously Sharon identifies with it, says we have a Chick-fil-A near our home, and it's always big lines. And again, it shows that values that don't necessarily add up to fiscal sense, because again, you're talking giving up 14% of your time to be able to earn money, and yet they are a good example of how it overcomes by standing on values. Let's see here, and
just before you jump into the next one, I just want to mention this, right? And that's, my mind just all over the place, but it just keeps coming back to certain things that I reiterate. And I talk a lot about compounded growth within organizations. Something that, I'm a huge, I give this little speech once in a while. I'm a huge fan of oak trees, right? My son is named Oakley. My first company was named Oak Tree Consulting. And because of that, the reason for it is because oak represents that sturdy foundation that can withstand many storms. And every time it grows on top of itself. And what I see often, companies, they are like tumbleweeds. They create this great sporadic, very fast growth, right? But then it just happens again next year based on some other place, some other thing, some other hot topic. But when a storm comes or a season ends, they're like a tumbleweed, just gets blown over all over the place. And the companies that figure out that we don't want to be a tumbleweed, they go, here's our set of values, here's our beliefs, here's our culture. We root in that. And then we build on top of that. We build on top of that stable foundation. And then we can withstand any storm like COVID or anything else that the world is going to throw at us.
Yeah. Great analogy. I'm sorry, when you start talking about tumbleweeds, I think of there was a cartoon called Tumbleweeds back in the day, and it's brought a chuckle. Uh, but that is so true. Is that we find when we have strong roots. I mean, one of the characteristics of an oak is its strong roots, and when we have strong roots in our values, and there again, it has to be a shared set of values. It can't be, well, this is where they're so broad sweeping that people get excluded. It has to be an essential set of core values that everyone can agree on. These are things that we don't compromise on in our culture. And then you can expand the same concept to a larger perspective for the company. But even that, your team values should tie into your company values. And if I hear people complaining about their job, and when they start complaining in regards to the uh, areas of values, I'm going, if the company's values are that different than your own, why are you staying there? And we have been conditioned to think that we've got to earn money to live. And I understand and I appreciate that, paying the bills and so on. But to sacrifice your values and your person in order to get a paycheck is part of the conflict and problem that we see in our work culture today. We've got people that are in there that aren't sharing those values. And rather than being fully productive, they are depending on their value sets. Some will work harder than others to do the right thing because that's their value. But even then, if you're always struggling, your motivation level is going to be hard to maintain. Your stress levels are going to be high. And so, to me, uh, working with a company or organization and not having these shared essential values, it's a disaster waiting to happen for us both, on so many levels, and to a point that we watch work situations causing people's health to collapse because of the non-alignment of these values.
It's interesting you're talking about people stay in the companies where they don't fit in, don't feel like they belong, or they shouldn't be there. And we've also mentioned by focusing on roots of the problem, we usually self-correct a lot of issues up top. And if we're focusing on the values, and we already mentioned this value, helping people to believe in themselves. This is maybe in a different direction than most people would take it. Most people stay because they don't believe they can find something better, because they don't think they can do something better. They can't, there's no opportunity for them. And if we as leaders focus on people believing in themselves better as a foundational value, we may lose them. That's the reality. And that's fine, because when they're there, they're occupying a place of another person that could fit our culture much better, that could fit our values much better.
Mm.
And that goes back to the development conversations we've had and things like that. But don't be afraid to make people believe in themselves, and maybe they'll just leave because they don't belong there. They shouldn't have been there. And somebody that believes in your company will replace them.
Yeah, and as a leader, one of the things that we have to do in and around values is, if we see someone that doesn't have the shared values, rather than be critical of those folks, say, look, I'm concerned that your values don't align. And I'm not commenting that your values are good or bad, but they don't align. And one of the most caring things we can do is say, let's help you find a place where your values align with the company or team values, so that you can be the best you can. And I know in management leadership, that's a rather radical concept, but if the more we do that, the greater chance we have of, if other leaders are doing the same thing, we raise the pool of culture, and we have a better chance of finding those people that do fit and that will. And so again, it's got to get away from this self-centeredness, this scarcity, selfishness, all of those different components. Welcome, Aaron. Glad to have
I
you
know. I was gonna
here.
say hi, Erin. Long time no see. She's a friend of both of ours.
Yeah, glad to have
Um,
you here. And interesting, Hawk makes an observation, and it's always good to look at creation to get insights because creation reflects our Creator and the wisdom there. Oh, wrong one. Here we go. To me, the dandelion is an idol, grows through tarmac, yet is fragile. Yeah, plants are interesting. They will find root in places that look impossible, and sometimes they end up being fragile and losing. But there are also times, I'll give an example here at my home. We have a big maple tree next to our house, and we realized that the roots of that tree were growing underneath our house. And you think, okay, so what? Well, those roots and the strength of them were enough that it actually was moving our foundation. And so the strength of the roots and can overcome so many things, including uh, uh, external obstacles and so on. Um, and let's see. And thank you, everyone. I appreciate the comments of gratitude, but we feel the same way towards you guys. And Suzette makes a comment, and it is such an insightful one. It says groupthink is a serious problem of team dynamics. It really is. And that is one thing that we have to be careful as we consider our values is not to set up a situation where we have groupthink. In fact, one of the things we talk about is the value of diversity and uniqueness. That is part of the value of having the diversity and uniqueness in our teams is to avoid groupthink. And a strong leader knows that, and they will actually look for members of their team that become uh, complementary to each other in the way of strengths and weaknesses. And when we do that, that helps us to avoid groupthink. One of the when I build a team of people to do something, I make it a point to especially find people that are not like me, including not just talent and strengths and weaknesses wise, but temperamentally. Uh, if everybody has the same temperament, you grow into a real problem. And a good leader knows that. And so we learn to appreciate the value of the uniqueness and diversity of our team. And that also, we keep coming back around, that's another value. The value is that we share is we don't want a group that everybody looks alike, thinks alike, is has the same strengths, has the same temperaments, because that is going to be detrimental to any team.
To me, some of the favorite people that I've worked with are people that challenge my values, people that
Mhm.
challenge the values of the company. And it's not challenging them to prove them wrong. It's challenging and saying, why do you believe that? And is it still current? Right. There's sometimes that we've carried for a long time as a value and maybe it needs to shift. And we
Yeah,
need to constantly get away from that so we don't have groupthink, so we don't have those outdated values because that can happen, folks. It's not, values are not one of those things that is, okay, you've said it forever. The world is an ever changing place. You are constantly growing and learning, and you shouldn't change them day to day. It's not what I'm saying. But if you hadn't had somebody challenge your values in a while, go do that. Go have somebody challenge them and make sure you can stand up for them just as firmly as you did when you first said them. Perhaps you need to work on why you believe in them and reinforce that, or perhaps you need to reshift your values a little bit and find some, new ones that fit more of who you are today.
yeah. There was a time where in my journey, where I looked for people that agreed with me, but I found out that what I was doing was it's one of those external addictions, if you will, to make me feel better by having people that agree with me all the time. And as I've grown and come to understand me and accept and love who I'm created, I now value people that will challenge me on some level, because it keeps me from mistaking traditions for values. We get caught up in what are traditional to um, our age or our region or whatever. Whereas if we have people around us that go, well, why is that? And is it really important? And so on, is for me, that's such a great value to have, because it keeps me growing along the way. And it will help me shed things that are not truly core values, or it will help me be better at explaining why that is a core value. And that is important. In fact, I would suggest that one of the things that an effective leader is going to do is need to have a team value conversation, and it should be open and an opportunity to really talk about and discuss people in your team. Let them share. And I will warn that it's necessary to have developed a leadership culture in order to do this, because if you don't, people are going to be frightened and it's not going to go well. But if you develop that culture of security in your team, then definitely a conversation needs to be had. What are our values individually? And then what are our common values as a group? And when we can come around to those common values, then just being there doing what we do becomes motivation, because we're all have that common bond to be able to do what we do. A lot of demotivation has to do with a lack of common ground in your team or organization. If everybody is doing everything on their own and being unique to themselves, you never have the value of team. And one of the things I've always noticed is that when I do something by myself, I can accomplish a good bit because I work hard at it and hopefully know what I'm doing. But one of the things that I enjoyed about my brother is that when we got together, rather than our effort being doubled, it was tripled and quadrupled because of the value of being together with a common ground and a common mission, if you will, and vision. It's so powerful.
No, as we got to wrap up, folks, I just want to leave you with this. Don't have to wait for your leaders to make this happen. The people, the managers in your companies, the high level executives, you can create this in a break room if you wanted to, and get a group of people together and say, what does this team believe in? What do we stand behind? What are our values? If that's missing, or just have a conversation with your leader and say, I'd like to lead a value workshop for this team, and take some load off their shoulders. And, if you ever need to reach out, we can help you and give you some advice. But, one really practical exercise that I personally like and enjoy, kind of like what Kevin was talking about, getting all these bunch of different values and bring them under one umbrella, is a very simple sticky note exercise. You get everybody to write down on sticky notes, one sticky note per value that they have. What are all these different values? And then you start to group them together, and you start to say, okay, these group together with these. And basically what you end up having is loosely tying in many different values under a few central ones that coexist in some way, shape, or form with all the different beliefs that people have, versus just having this one word that's like, okay, integrity. Well, okay, great. But how does that tie into what people actually said is close to their heart? But if now somebody came out and said, doing what I said I'm going to do when nobody's even looking. Okay, great. That's my personal value. But if you just said integrity and you didn't tie those two together, it's not going to have as much impact. But if you went through that exercise and you rolled them all up to those centralized, easy to remember values, they're going to be much more effective.
Yeah. Welcome, Lee. Glad to have you. Even late is fine. We understand challenges, and And Anton Hawk has used one of your favorite words. He has talked about synergy. And yeah, I like the word. I think it's very descriptive, Hawk, and we use it in spite of it being maybe passe or old
Not a
school.
buzzword in my book because
It's
people say, well, accountabilities became not there's another buzzword. Everybody's trying to use these things. They're afraid of them. Alignment is what they're saying is better. I'm like, no, alignment. I could be aligned, but not creating a better outcome. We're
right.
all aligned in the wrong way. Synergy has to be alignment with a positive outcome that's greater than some individual parts. As you can tell, I love the word.
Every time we have discussions as a team, we get around that. We start to put it in there, and then we go, well, no, that's not current. But then we go, oh well, it still has value. So thanks everyone so much. Appreciate your engagement. Your engagement makes the difference. Anton and I can sit and talk, and we're good at talking and passionate about it. But what we really appreciate is your engagement. It brings so much to the podcast and the value of it. So thank you so much. Yeah, I agree, Lee. He asked a question: how many people can we count on in the terms of integrity? It's a challenge. Another conversation for another day. So thank you again.
Next week we're talking performance management. We have is it the night? No, 2 weeks from now. Never mind. Sorry, I jumped the gun. 2 weeks from now we have a great guest. I just want to announce it now. I got one of my old college professors from a few years back to come and talk about performance management, and he's like been in the space for a really long time, but he humanizes performance management. So definitely, if you can't make it next week, make sure you make it the following week.
Well, and if you are connected with an organization, a company that needs some help in this area, we share a lot, but we sometimes forget. Would love to work with your organization, your company, and get involved and help to identify some of these organizational challenges and help implement them based on the need of the company. We don't have a boilerplate approach or a package something that we just come and say, well, just plug this in everywhere. We like to come in, identify the needs, get to the root causes, and then develop a plan to address those. So if at any point somebody, also check out our stress assessment. It's on our website. It's free. Love for you to go in, try it out, invite others to do so. And if you have a team that you have do it, if you'll let us know, we'll even do a free team interpretation of the results of the assessment. So just some different options out there. Thank you. We will see you guys again next Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. We'll get the topic out before the next gathering. Thanks, everybody. You're such an important part of what we do and who we are.
Thanks. Have a great week.
Have a great week, and we